Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is watching porn. Actually, not just someone, millions of people simultaneously at this exact moment. The largest adult content platforms serve over 100 million visitors per day. It is one of the most consumed categories of content in human history, and we treat it like it's always been there, like it's just a natural part of life. But here's the thing. For 300,000 years of human existence, so what did ancient humans actually do with one of the most powerful biological drives ever hardwired into a species? The answer isn't what you'd expect, and it reaches into archaeology, neuroscience, mythology, and the very structure of the human brain. So let's do a time travel all the way back to 35,000 years ago and see what humans were actually doing. Let's go back roughly 35,000 years. A human being, somewhere in what is now Europe or Africa, picks up a piece of stone or bone and starts carving. What they create isn't a weapon, it isn't a map. It's a human figure, exaggerated hips, prominent chest, no face, just the body. These objects are called Venus figurines, and archaeologists have found them scattered across an enormous geographic range, from Western Europe all the way to Siberia. The most famous one, the Venus of Willendorf, was carved roughly 25,000 years ago and is small enough to fit in your palm. Now, for a long time, scientists assumed these were fertility symbols, religious objects, essentially. But more recent analysis has suggested something more complicated. Many of these figurines show signs of heavy handling, worn smooth in specific areas. Some were found in what appear to be private sleeping spaces rather than communal ritual zones. The debate among researchers is very much alive, but the implication is hard to ignore. Ancient humans were creating visual representations of the human body, and those representations mattered to them in ways that went beyond the purely spiritual. Whether that crosses into what we'd call erotic art today is speculative, but cave carvings were just the beginning. Fast forward 30,000 years, and entire civilizations were built around this drive. But the drive to visualize desire appears to be as old as art itself. But visual objects were just one piece of it. The bigger story is ritual. In virtually every ancient culture ever studied, sexuality wasn't something kept behind closed doors. It was embedded into the fabric of public life, religion, and ceremony. Fertility cults existed across Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, the Indus Valley, and pre-Columbian Americas. The goddess Ishtar in ancient Babylon was explicitly a deity of both war and sexual love. Temples dedicated to her employed what ancient texts describe as sacred workers, individuals whose role was tied directly to ritual sexuality. In ancient Greece, the god Priapus was depicted so explicitly that his statues were used as scarecrows in gardens because the imagery was considered powerful enough to ward off thieves and evil spirits. The Romans inherited this tradition and ran with it. Pompeii, frozen in time by the eruption of Vesuvius in 79 AD, was covered in explicit frescoes, mosaics, and sculptures, not in hidden rooms, on the streets, above doorways, painted on the walls of restaurants. For ancient people, sexuality wasn't something to be ashamed of or hidden. It was a force of nature, and they treated it like one. And it wasn't just temples and statues. Gather around a fire at night, and the stories got even wilder. Then there's the campfire. We talked about how firelight transformed human storytelling, but here's the part that rarely makes it into history class. Ancient oral traditions were not sanitized. Myths and stories passed down around fires for thousands of years were often explicitly sexual, violent, and raw. The stories of the Greek gods Zeus, Aphrodite, Ares read more like dramatic adult fiction than the polished mythology we learn in school. Norse sagas contain graphic content that would easily earn an age restriction today. Indigenous oral traditions across Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific include creation stories and trickster tales with explicit actual themes told openly across generations, including to young people who were being educated about adult life. Storytelling was the content. And before writing existed, these stories lived in people's heads, passed mouth to ear, generation to generation. The campfire wasn't just the original classroom, it was also, in some respects, the original entertainment industry. And it didn't shy away from the full spectrum of human experience. Here's something that almost never gets said directly. For most of human history, sex itself was far less separated from daily life than it is today. Modern humans live in individual apartments, nuclear families, compartmentalized routines. Ancient humans lived in close communal groups where privacy was limited and where reproduction was not a personal decision hidden from the community, it was survival. Multiple studies of contemporary hunter-gatherer groups have noted that sexual activity is far less concealed than in modern Western societies, not because ancient people were exhibitionists, but because the concept of rigid sexual privacy is, historically speaking, a relatively recent cultural invention. The drive existed, the outlet existed, the gap between desire and action, the one that modern pornography partly fills, was simply narrower. But what about the mind? What about desire that had no immediate outlet? This is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Remember the between-sleep state, that ancient window of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night, where the brain sat in an elevated meditative condition? Researchers studying that hormonal window found that the brain in that state is highly active in the regions associated with imagination, memory retrieval, and emotional processing. It's a state naturally conducive to vivid mental imagery. Dreams were not considered random noise by ancient peoples. They were treated as messages, visions, and experiences as real as waking life. Across ancient Egypt, Greece, and Mesopotamia, sexual dreams were recorded, analyzed, and taken seriously as meaningful events. The Roman writer Artemidorus wrote an entire book, the Oneirocritica, cataloging hundreds of dream types, including explicit sexual dreams, and interpreting their significance. For ancient humans, the interior landscape of the mind at night was a rich, vivid world, not a void to be filled with a screen. Humans carried all of this in their heads for thousands of years. Then one invention changed everything. Then came the printing press, and everything changed. By the 1500s, the first printed erotic literature began circulating in Europe. Pietro Aretino's Posizioni, published in 1527 alongside explicit illustrations, is often cited as the first mass-produced pornographic work in Western history. When copies became affordable enough to circulate widely, governments immediately tried to ban them. The cycle of production, distribution, suppression, and consumption that defines the modern pornography industry began the moment the technology allowed it. The printing press started it, but technology wasn't done yet. Photography arrived in the 1800s, and within years, nude photographs were being sold illegally across Europe. First came the photograph, then came something even bigger. Film arrived in the early 1900s, and pornographic films appeared within the first decade of cinema's existence. The internet arrived in the 1990s, and within a decade it was reshaped around adult content in ways that its inventors didn't fully anticipate. Every time a new medium appeared, human desire colonized it almost immediately. And all of this brings us back to right now, 2026, and the real question. So here's the real question the history raises. Ancient humans weren't repressed. They weren't suffering. They had ritual, story, community, direct experience, and a dream life that modern science is only beginning to understand. What they didn't have was a dopamine delivery mechanism optimized by algorithms to hold attention indefinitely. What they didn't have was a substitute for connection, because for most of human history, the real thing wasn't locked behind a screen. Modern research on heavy pornography consumption consistently points to the same finding. It doesn't satisfy the drive, it amplifies it, rewires the reward system, and creates an appetite that grows rather than shrinks. Ancient humans, for all their hardship, weren't feeding a loop. They were living inside the actual experience that the loop is a shadow of. We didn't just get a new technology. We got a replacement for something ancient and real, and most of us never noticed the trade happening. Ancient humans weren't repressed, they weren't suffering. They were living the real thing, and we traded it for a screen. Most of us never even noticed.